And then I clicked into the final email and they were like, Sarah Snook is going to play the lead. And I literally screamed, ran down the stairs, showed the phone to my husband. I was like, does that say Sarah Snook from Succession? And he's, oh my God. And yeah, so that was such a moment.
Hello and welcome to Ray of Light, a podcast all about writing, reading and finding light in creativity with me, Eleanor Ray. I write character-driven novels about connection, resilience and what happens when life doesn't go to plan. Today's guest is a best-selling crime novelist whose work taps into one of the deepest fears many of us carry, the moment when something happens to a child, and the quiet judgment that follows. Her fiction explores motherhood, community pressure, and the stories we tell ourselves when everything starts to unravel. One of her novels was recently adapted for television and stars Sarah Snook and Dakota Fanning, bringing her work to a whole new audience. I'm delighted to welcome Andrea Mara to Ray of Light.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being on. I'm especially excited to have you on the show because we read early copies of each other's books back in lockdown. So I was lucky enough to read All Her Fault before it came out, and I gave it a quote because I loved it. It was brilliant. And I think you read my book, Everything is Beautiful, back then. I certainly sensed there was something special about it. Did you know that that was going to be the book that kind of broke your career out?
Yes, I hoped. I do remember few paragraphs of the first chapter and getting a kind of a fizzy feeling that I hadn't really had before. So that it was my fourth book, but I had done 3 for a small Irish publisher, and that was my contract fulfilled with them. And it was a great start. But what I hadn't realized when I signed my contract with them is that my books would only be distributed in Ireland. And I remember, writing the first few paragraphs and thinking, oh, I feel like I know where this is going. I feel like I know the voice of the main character, Marissa, but still, you know yourself, you never really know. Is it going to work? Is it going to get picked up? Are people going to like it?
So I absolutely agree. And everyone I've spoken to on this podcast has been riddled by imposter syndrome as well. And writing something and one day thinking, oh my goodness, this is the best thing ever. And then the next day thinking, no one can ever read this. I don't know whether you go through something like that as well.
All the time, all the time. And I especially find if I step away from it, the darkness sets in. So like even I might finish writing whatever chapter on a Friday. And then if I'm not in a massive rush for a deadline, I'm very happy to take the weekend off and hang out with my kids and do nice things. But then on Monday morning, I'm like, oh my God, what is this thing I'm writing? This is horrific. And it takes me a bit of time to get back into the flow again and go, okay, maybe it's okay. Maybe it's going to work. So yes, absolutely riddled like everybody else.
No weekends for you then, that's the lesson.
Yeah, I just work all the time. So the imposter syndrome's kept at bay.
Yes. Now, can we talk for a moment about your most recent novel, It Should Have Been You? Can you tell us a little bit about that one and what first sparked the idea?
Yeah, so It Should Have Been You is about Susan who sends a WhatsApp message. She thinks she's sending it to her sisters and she's giving out about her neighbor who gets on her nerves. And she's talking about the neighbor's husband. She's like, she knew what her husband was up to and what her teenage son is up to and her teenage daughter. And she reveals things in the message. But then instead of sending it to her sister group, she sends it to her entire neighborhood WhatsApp group in which her neighbor is, the one she's talking about. So of course it flies around. People are taking screenshots. People are responding, going, uh-oh, wrong group, I think.
Such a good premise. I love it because it's the kind of thing everyone sent a message to someone accidentally and didn't mean to. I once sent one to, I was complaining about some boy and I sent it to the boy instead of to my friend. And I think it's something that we can all relate to at some stage of our lives. And yet when it takes a dark turn, oh, it sounds fantastic. I'm looking forward to reading. Now, can you tell us a little bit about your path to publication? Because as you mentioned, so you had your initial books and then All Her Fault. How did that all happen? When did you start writing? Tell us it all.
So I only started writing about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. So I worked in financial services for a very long time. And I loved my job there. I loved a spreadsheet. I would still be there if circumstances hadn't pushed me out the door. I had started blogging around that time, a couple of years before the office closed. And it was about kids and parenting and trying to juggle being at work all day, having my kids in nursery all day, worrying about it, feeling guilty, looking at my husband going, why doesn't he feel guilty? And just a bit
Yes.
like every single mother before me, having that like thing of going, especially I suppose our generation more than ever, because most of us are going straight from a full-time job to a first maternity leave. There's very few people, I think, who would just be at home already and then have kids. So it's such a shock to the system. So I was like getting it all out of my system with my blog posts that I was like hammering out on the laptop every night when my kids went to bed. And that ignited a real love of writing that I had forgotten I ever had. From I hadn't written anything other than an email since my school days. And then at one point, somebody commented on my Facebook page for my blog saying, you should write a book. And the next morning, I started writing what became my first book. So I think I'm just a person who needs a push. So I think I would have thought, who would I think that I am to write a book? And I needed somebody to nudge me. And that's when I started writing The Other Side of the Wall, which became my first book with the Irish publisher that I was talking about. And yeah, it just went from there. Of course, it's yourself, same as every author. There's roadblocks in between. Like I wrote a version of that book that was part contemporary thriller, part sweeping family saga historic novel. I don't know what I was doing.
Interesting old genre cross there.
And I hadn't a clue. I didn't know you couldn't do that. I knew
Yeah.
nothing about publishing. I knew I loved reading. I'd always loved reading, but I had never stopped to think about genre, about different classifications of types of books. But I did a date with an agent in 2015 here in Dublin. And it was my agent that I got to meet for 15 minutes or 5 minutes, I think. It was Claire Wallace from Darley Anderson. And she said to me, okay, you've written something in two genres. You can't do that. And it sounds so obvious, but it just wasn't obvious to me. And she said, so pick one and go with that. And she said, if I were you, I would go with the contemporary thriller. So that's what I did. I got rid of all the back stuff, made the thriller part the full book. And that came out then 9 years ago with the Irish publisher. And I did two more with them. And then All Her Fault got me my UK deal.
Yes. Oh, that sounds amazing. And it's so interesting. The first book I wrote, I didn't have an idea of genre. I'm just going to write what I want and what I'd be interested in, which I think is not a bad approach to writing a book. But then when you get professional feedback, you really need to listen and think, if I'm writing for myself, I can ignore it. If I'm doing something that I want to be published, then I need to listen. And I can choose what I do with it, but I need to listen to those professional advice. You must be very glad that you did.
Yeah, I am. And I think you make such a good point there. And it's hard too for people who are starting out, I think, because you're told don't try to write to market, write what you
Yes.
want to write. And I fully believe in that. And I think, you know, if you just look at the shelves and you go, okay, this Frida McFadden person seems to be selling well, I'll try and write one of those. If that's not where your heart lies, I think it will maybe come out feeling inauthentic. And I think getting something written in the first instance is crucial. You can't do anything if you've not written a first draft of something.
Yes.
But once you have a first draft down, then you can go and play with it, figure out what genre it is, tweak it and twist it so that it works for wherever you're trying to sell it.
Yes, absolutely. Now, talking of trying to sell it, All Her Fault, huge reader favourite, bestseller, and it's then adapted beautifully for screen. Tell me about that book, where that book came from.
That book was based on something that happened in real life. So my middle child, she was 5. She was on a play date, first play date with this particular friend. I had met the mom at coffee one morning, kind of a class coffee. That was it. And I went to collect her. And when I turned up, there was no answer at the door. And I peered in the glass panels at the side of the door and could see not only was there no one there, there was no furniture there. There was nobody living in this house. And immediately I thought, oh my God, she's been kidnapped. This is a fake play date. Nobody lives here. What's going on? But then it turned out they had moved house and I had their old address. And so that was where the idea came from. But it
That's
was a
so
few more
interesting. So
years.
it's pretty much exactly how the book begins.
Yeah. Then what happened was my eldest, I was chatting to her and saying to her a few years later, "Oh, I think I'm going to go with that playdate story next." And she said, "Oh, why don't you have it instead of no one answering the door? What if a stranger answered the door and they had never heard of the playdate?" And I thought, okay, yes, that's even better. So that's what
Way
happens
better.
in the book. And that's what happens in the TV show as well, which is really nice. The opening scenes of the TV show are very faithful to the book, which is fun.
They are. A lot of it's quite faithful, isn't it? Like there were places where it deviated. What was the process like of the adaptation?
The TV show needed to be 8 1-hour episodes. So she was like, okay, we're going to need to add in extra side stories and backstories and plots to make it last for 8 hour long episodes. And she ran through some of what she was thinking. And of course, I was like, that sounds great. That sounds great. Like, I certainly didn't ever feel it was my place to say, don't like the sound of that. Why don't you do this? I did like the sound of all of it, but I certainly wouldn't have had the confidence to object to any of it if I did.
And how did you feel about the casting when you found out? Presumably you weren't given much choice, but was it something you were happy with? Was it how you envisioned your characters?
When I heard it was Sarah, I screamed and ran down the stairs because I had been out signing books all day in a warehouse and my notifications on my email hadn't come through. And then they all came through at once. And the emails were saying there was one email going, "You're getting casting news later," and another email going, "You will be getting casting news this afternoon." And just all these emails telling me I am going to get news. And I'm like, but what is the news? Because I think that the two huge moments. One was hearing that Peacock had given it the green light and it was going straight to series. They weren't asking for a pilot first, which is very often the case. And then a lot of pilots don't go anywhere, which I think must be really hard. And the second big moment was hearing about Sarah because I didn't know, I had never done this before. And I was just hoping and trusting that everyone knew what they were doing. And when I heard Sarah was taking the lead, I thought, I feel like she would have a good eye for what's going to turn out to be good TV. And she would have people who advise her on these things. And if she's saying yes, I feel like I can sit back and go, this is going to be great. And this is going to be a success.
Amazing. Are you a Succession fan?
God, yeah, absolutely.
Me too. Love it. Love it. Amazing. So you have a little cameo. Is that true?
Yes, I do. Yes. So I was at filming and I know Harlan Coben does cameos in his
Yeah.
TV adaptations.
Lee
And
Child does as well, doesn't he? He's often in his.
oh, really? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think he's sitting in the cafe when Jack Reacher's having peach pie in one of the first episodes.
Seen him as a
Yes. So
security guard as well at airport security, I think.
love
Yeah,
it.
you can, if you look out for him, you can often see him in the
Okay,
Jack
I'm going to
Reachers.
start looking out. And so I knew it was a thing, but all week long, the filming, so it was all set in the main living room of the house that the Irvines live in. And that meant I couldn't be an extra because you've just got the main characters. There were maybe 5 or 6 people in each scene, so nowhere for me to be. And on the last day, we went to a different part of the studio and they were filming a prison scene where two of the characters are in a prison visiting room and there's 50 extras all in there to be the prison visitors and the prisoners. And I turned to the screenwriter, Megan, and I was like, oh my God, I should have asked to be an extra. And she was like, just ask now. And I was like, oh my God, I can't. Like Kate, who's the director, she is so busy. Like they're all so busy all the time. I was like, I don't want to be bothering her asking to be an extra, which feels like such a frivolous thing when she's crazy busy. But Megan happily sneaked off behind my back and said it to Kate. And Kate came over and she said, I heard you want to be in it. And she had the costume designer over and the costume designer looked me up and down. She was like, you'll be fine as you are. I was like, okay, so my jeans and sweatshirt are perfect to be a prison visitor. That's good to know. And my hair was wonderfully frizzy that day. And yes, my badly applied makeup at 6 a.m. was just right for the role, it seems. So it was really good fun. After a while, when we were on about the 6th take, I thought, okay, I'm getting hungry now. Maybe I've signed up for a bit more than I thought with how long this takes. but it was so worth it because it was really fun. And they were so good about it because Kate put me in a position where she said, I've put you here because this is your best chance of making it into the final scenes, because she put me right behind the two main characters and the camera's coming at an angle that it'll catch me, and it worked. It was great. So it was really fun, but not enough people spotted me. So I think maybe my acting was just too good or something.
Yeah, you blended blended in too well. Amazing. That must have been a writing dream come true, was it? Did it feel really weird, really surreal, seeing these
Yeah, like
people acting out
everything about
your
that
book?
trip. It's like
Yeah.
writing as we do it at home on our own most of the time. There's nobody to talk to. And I really like the social side. I love the launches, the parties, going to Harrogate every year. So the TV side is an even more amazing extension of all of that, because I'm very starry eyed about the whole thing. So I'm not cool, calm, and collected when I see famous people. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God. And at the filming, I got to meet Sarah. I got to meet Abby Elliott, who plays Leah. Michael Pena came out to eat cake. They bring, oh, so much lovely food on set all the time. So there's this table at 3 o'clock every afternoon covered in cake. And I love a table covered in cake. And I was eating some cake, and Michael Pena, who plays Detective Alcaraz, he came over and he was eating the cake, and we were chatting about cake. And then someone introduced us, and he was like, oh, what's it like writing a book? And he was really fascinated to know more about writing a book.
Sounds amazing. And it's all because you wrote a fantastic book. One of the things I really liked about All Her Fault was how well you capture motherhood. You got the school gate politics, which they did very well in the TV as well, and that underlying kind of sense of guilt that you always have when you're a mother. It's like, am I doing this right? Am I doing that right? Am I spending more time with my kids? And should I be doing this? And especially when you've got work as well, all the pressure really builds. Were those themes you set out to explore, or were they things that came out naturally as you were writing?
They came out naturally in many respects, but I guess it's a topic that I was very interested at the time. Like
Mm,
when I was talking earlier about my blog, so my blog was very
yes.
much about that whole topic, trying to understand. My big thing that I couldn't understand was, why was I feeling guilty all the time, and why did my husband not feel guilty? So that was something that I ended up questioning a lot in blog posts in different ways. And then I guess it's logical that it ended up in quite a few of my books as well. I was joking with my husband when we were watching the show. I paused it at one point when they were talking about that whole division of labor thing. And I said, I tried to tell you at the time and you didn't listen. So then I wrote a book, but you didn't read the book. So I had to make a TV show. And he was, okay, I get it. But yeah, it's something I'll always be interested in. And even now that my kids are older, it's still there, that curiosity of, we've changed for sure. Like, I think nowadays, most families where there's a husband and a wife, we no longer have a situation where a wife is busy cooking and cleaning while the husband is sitting down reading the paper. Both people are working, both people are busy, both people are chipping in to do the housework. That's certainly how I found it back 10 years ago when I was bringing up my three small children with my husband and writing all these blog posts. But what I found was that he didn't think of things like what parties they had to go to, buying the present for the party, being in the parents' WhatsApp group, which days they had PE, all that kind of stuff. And I suppose that's the next level. So the fathers of today are certainly much better at sharing the physical load, but maybe lots of families are not finding they're there yet with the emotional labor of parenting. And that's part of All Her Fault, the book. And certainly Megan really leaned into that in the TV show. That was something she felt very strongly about as well.
Coming through very clearly, I think, in both. What kind of feedback have you had from parents and mothers? Have you heard much from people from that point of view?
Yet there was lots of chatter online about it, like on Instagram, lots of American websites about parenting discussing it and playing clips of especially the scenes between Jenny and Richie, where
Mhm.
Richie was just completely useless. He was definitely worse in the TV show in a very funny slash frustrating way than he was in the book.
Sandwich scene was a really powerful one, wasn't it? Where she came home from work and he just mess everywhere making this sandwich. He's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
done."
Yeah. Oh my God. And people who just leave the knife down on the worktop. I know someone in my house who does that still.
Was there a moment maybe when you became a mother and you thought, I'm not seeing the world or I'm not seeing writing in the same way I used to? Do you think it's really changed your writing? Well, I suppose it started it off in the first place.
Yeah. So I don't know what it was like before that. So I had kids
Mm.
and then I started writing. So I think I channel my fears into writing, that's for sure. And all of my books are about things happening to children. And when my kids were small, the books had children who were small who kept going missing. And now that my children are teenagers, the kids in the books tend to be teenagers and they're dealing with things like bullying and all sorts of things that teens deal with. Yeah.
It's nice. I love the way your books are growing with you. Absolutely. Now, we've talked a little bit about writing. What do you enjoy the most about it? What part of the process brings you the most happiness, perhaps?
Writing the end at the first end of a first draft, I would say. I find first draft hard to write and
Me
I
too.
just want to get to the end. And then once I get to the end, I can go back and do whatever I want with it. So there's a huge sense of relief if I know I have a story that has a beginning and has an ending, and then I can go back and play with it as such. And my other favorite part, though, is plotting ideas. So a bit like what I was saying I was doing earlier today, looking at ideas for the year after next and trying to see what would work, what wouldn't work, and thinking, oh, what if there was a lodger in the house? That kind of the like brainstorming thing.
Well, we're the same. I feel the same way. I love coming up with ideas, that initial kind of, ooh, when you come up with something, and it could be anything from there. You could take it, it could be the best book ever, it could be most, but it's full of potential. And then I find
Mm,
writing the first draft a real slog and full of anxiety and worry about, is it going to be good enough? Is it going to work? Is it going to be over too soon? All of that kind of stuff. But then once I've got it, going back and editing, I think that's where the real magic happens. And that's where you can
mm-hmm.
kind of really craft something that you're really happy with, but you're starting with something. So I think if you're, for any aspiring authors listening, it's worth getting to the end, even if it feels a little bit painful, because then you can go back and play with it.
Exactly.
What do you find? I think you've probably told me what you find the hardest. Is it that first draft? Is that the hardest part for you?
That's my joint hardest part. So first draft is hard, but first round of structural edits, oh my God. But I don't think
Yes.
there's an author in the world who enjoys structural edits. So that's just part of it, isn't it? There's no getting away from it. And I think we all probably do the same thing of reading the notes and going, oh my God, I cannot do this, and close the laptop and walk away, and then come back maybe a few hours later or a day later and be like, okay, maybe it doesn't look as bad as I thought. And there's that thing where you read some notes and you walk away and you hear it replayed in your head as something far worse. Like you're hearing it as, I really hate this book, nothing happens. And then you go back and read it and go, okay, nobody said that. That's just me and the imposter syndrome and all of that.
Yes. So for anyone listening who doesn't know, structural edits are like the big notes that you get from your editor when you've handed in your very first, maybe second draft, something that you're happy with, and then they come back and tell you all the problems with it that you need to fix.
Yeah. Big red pen.
Right. Yes, big red pen. But I always I'm the same. You get them, you think, "No." And then after a while you think, "Oh, actually, maybe that makes sense. Maybe I could do that. Maybe it wouldn't destroy everything I've done." And yeah, often it's the book's better for having done it. Now, do you have any more advice for aspiring authors? Anything that you maybe wish you were told when you started out, or that you tell people now for someone just getting started writing a book?
Like one thing that comes to mind when you say something I wish I'd been told, I was told that a book needs to be 100,000 words. And I really overwrote my first book. It was about 120,000. And then I had to cut, and I probably didn't cut enough in reality. Whereas now, when I get to about 40,000 words, I go, okay, time to start winding up the plot. And my end of first draft usually ends up about 65,000. And
Oh,
then
really?
what what I end up handing into my editor is usually a fourth draft, and that could be somewhere around 75,000. And then after his edits, it's going to be maybe 85, 90,000. But like it just saves me from all that overwriting that I used to do at the beginning and then having to cut. And it's also much more doable. So when I'm starting out a first draft now, I'm really thinking get to 40,000 and then start bringing the arc back down, start trying to get to the end of the story. And that works much better for me because it's so daunting to think you have to write 100,000 words. So I don't do that anymore.
Yeah. It's really good advice. I'm surprised you were told 100. My books are only ever 80,000, possibly 90,000 words. And I underwrite. I write quite short, and then I kind of go back and add more things in and add the details once I've started. But yeah, heading towards a word count rather than heading towards the end of a story probably a wrong-headed way to go about it, I think, because you put words in that you don't need. Whereas if
Yeah.
you're just, what's the essence of the story? How do I tell this story with a beginning, middle, and end? Then see how long it is. And there's quite a lot of
Yeah.
flexibility for how long books actually have to be.
The person who said it to me was just someone who had written a book themselves. And so it wasn't like a publisher or an editor or anyone who said it. But when someone says something, it just sticks in your brain and you think
Sticks,
that's the
yeah.
golden rule. That must be really important. And it took me a while to realize that's not what it's about at all.
Excellent. Now, moving away from our writing and our books for a minute, can you tell me about a book you've read and loved recently?
Yeah, so one that comes to mind is Esther is Now Following You by Tanya Sweeney. So Tanya is a journalist here in Ireland, and she has the same editor as I do in Transworld. So I got to read a proof of this last summer, and I absolutely loved it. It's about a woman called Esther who is obsessed with a pop star, for the want of a better word, a Canadian pop star who would be kind of like a Justin Bieber type person, but he's called Ted. And she's obsessed with Ted to a point where she moves to Canada to like kind of stalk him. And when you realize that's what it's about at first, you're like, nobody would do that. Nobody would move to another country. Is this just is going to be a very humorous but crazy book? But when you're reading it, it's very funny, but it's also very moving. And when you're reading it, you do reach a point where you're like, I totally get why she moved to Canada, even though it sounds like such an insane thing to do. And I think that is real talent and art, to be able to take something that sounds like a crazy idea, but write it in such a way that the reader goes, yeah, I see why she did that. And you're rooting for her. You want to shake her because of some of the ridiculous things she does, but you want to hug her as well. And you just want to mind her and tell her she's okay. And it's absolutely brilliant.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. Oh, I look forward to reading that. Now, back to you for a moment. Aside from writing, what do you love? What brings you joy?
My dog. This is my dog on my knee, being a good girl. My kids when I'm not ferrying them around places. And honestly, reading and TV are my two favorite things. Like my husband and I, at the end of a long day of all the things, work and kids and sports and all the things, the nicest part of every day is like 10 o'clock at night. We sit down on the couch and we put on an episode of whatever it is we're watching. And we always just watch one episode, unless it's a weekend, then we can go crazy and watch two episodes. But we're really fussy. Like, it's got to be a good TV show. We're not wasting our time on things that we don't really like. Like, we've just finished Long Bright River, which is the TV adaptation of Liz Moore's book. It's absolutely incredible. It's a fantastic book and a fantastic adaptation. So usually it's crime drama, psychological thrillers, or whatever the really good shows are. Like, it could be White Lotus, it could be Slow Horses, but other couples have really nice, wholesome hobbies like going for walks together. Ours is watching TV together.
Brilliant. And I have to say that 10 o'clock moment of husband and me watching TV together, that's when we watched All Her Faults together, and we loved it. And it's absolutely perfect for that moment. Now, what's next? What are you working on now?
I have a new book coming in May called Such a Nice Girl. So that's the next thing. So that's proofs going out at the moment and some reviews coming in and all of that. So that'll be the next exciting thing to come, and publication then in May.
Excellent. Oh, how exciting. Well, thank you so much, Andrea. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. And your latest novel, It Should Have Been You, is out now in paperback. My latest novel, See the Stars, came out in paperback recently. Well, so we could be paperback buddies.
Congratulations.
So thank you very much to you. And thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed Ray of Light, please do like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me at Eleanor Ray Books on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. I'd love to hear from you. And if you've enjoyed today's conversation, you might like my books too. My most recent novel, See the Stars, as I said, is out in paperback, a story about finding meaning and connection when life doesn't go to plan. So see you next time for more conversations about reading, writing, and happiness.